Everyone in Hiroshima had the same instinct. Run. At 8:15 in the morning, a single flash turned the sky into a burning white sun. Buildings collapsed. The air itself caught fire. And in seconds, the city was gone. People fled toward the rivers, toward open ground, anywhere away from the heat, except one man. While the city burned, he walked down to the water, found a small wooden boat, and pushed it in. Not to escape, to go back. He rode straight into the smoke, into the fire, into a city that no longer existed. And the smoke swallowed him. And years later, that same man would stand face to face with the very person who dropped the bomb. This is Monochrome Documentaries. We bring history's overlooked heroes to center stage. In the summer of 1945, Hiroshima felt like a city waiting to be hit. The air raid sirens had become part of daily life. When they screamed, people stopped. Nothing happened. Then the all clear would sound, and everyone would go back to pretending the next one would be the same. But Hiroshima had not been touched like the other cities. It had been left standing while the rest of Japan burned, and the silence around it didn't feel like luck. The rumors had started to spread. Hiroshima was a military city, a port city, a flat target cut by rivers and bridges, exposed and easy to map. It did not feel spared, it felt selected. Living inside that pressure was Kiyoshi Tanimoto. He had studied in the United States. He spoke English. In wartime Japan, that was enough to make him suspect. Every week, the police checked in on him. Every week, he had to prove he was harmless. He lived with his wife and baby daughter in a city that seemed to be holding its breath. And by that summer, that breath felt shorter every day. On August 6, 1945, the waiting ended. The morning of August 6th did not feel important. It was already warm, heavy, the kind of heat that settles on your skin before the sun fully rises. At 7:15 a.m., the siren went off. People stopped and listened. Then the all clear. Just one plane, the same one that came almost every day, high above the city and completely harmless. People stepped out again, back into the streets, back into routine. For a few more precious minutes, Hiroshima continued as if nothing had changed. Tanimoto was not in the center of the city. He was 2 miles away in Koi, moving things, carrying what he could, preparing for a raid that had not come yet. He hadn't slept well. The day before had been heavy work. His body was slow and his mind worse. He stepped into the garden and stopped. The morning felt eerily still, and then a bird somewhere in the trees. Just for a moment, he stood there. At 8:15, the light came. No warning, no buildup, no sound. Just light, absolute, white, light. He didn't think, he dropped. Drove himself between 2 rocks, with his face pressed into the ground. Then, the world caught up. The sound hit like something solid, a deep, crushing force that tore through the air. And the wind was not wind, it was force. It slammed into everything at once. The house behind him came apart instantly. Wood, tile, plaster, lifted, thrown, gone. For a second, nothing made sense. The sky was gone. The blue replaced by something moving, churning and thick. Dust, debris, and darkness. He stayed where he was, not moving, and then silence. Not quiet. Silence. Slowly, he lifted his head. The rocks had held. He was still alive. But the city was gone. Not damaged, not burning, gone. And somewhere inside that city was his wife and his baby daughter, Coco. His first thought was for his family, Chisa, Coco. They were somewhere inside that boiling ruin, somewhere in the center of the city, and if there was even the smallest chance they were still alive, then there was no choice at all. He turned and ran straight toward the fire. What he ran into did not look like a city. It looked like the place where a city had been erased. The streets were gone. The buildings were gone. In their place was a flat, burning expanse of rubble, smoke, and twisted wood, with black plumes rising from somewhere below the haze. The heat was immediate. Not warmth, pressure. The air itself seemed scorched, heavy with a strange, sweet, sickening smell that clung to the back of the throat. And then he saw the people. They came out of the dust in silence, moving slowly, as if the blast had stolen not only their homes, but the ability to understand what had happened to them. Their clothes hung in tatters, their skin blackened in places, peeled away in others, hanging from their arms in strips. Some held their hands out in front of them so the raw flesh wouldn't touch their bodies. They did not cry out. They did not call for help. They just moved forward, one step at a time. Tanimoto felt shame. He was clean, unburned, whole. And around him were people whose bodies had been turned into wounds. He moved faster, head down, pushing through the wreckage toward the neighborhood he knew. What was left of it was almost nothing. His house had collapsed into splinters, broken tile, and smashed wood. He stood there for a second, staring at the wreckage, then screamed for his wife. Nothing. He called again. Still nothing. The smoke pressed in around him. The whole street seemed to tremble under the heat. Then, from somewhere under the debris, a voice. Chisa. He dropped to his knees and began clawing through the rubble with both hands. Boards cut into his skin. Dust filled his mouth. He tore pieces of the broken house away one by one until at last he found her. The collapse had thrown her and the baby clear, with a pocket of space around them. Chisa was bruised, shaken. Coco was alive. He pulled them out. For a moment, that was enough. For a moment, there was relief. The city around them kept burning. The shuffling figures kept coming. The smoke kept rising. And when Tanimoto looked back across Hiroshima at the thousands still moving through the ruins, he understood that finding his family had not ended the nightmare. It had only changed what he was about to do next. The city began to move, not in one direction, in one instinct, toward water. Thousands made for the rivers, through smoke, through heat, through streets that no longer held their shape, all pulled by the same idea. Water meant relief. Water meant survival. They reached the banks and kept going, down the steps and into the water. For a moment, it worked. The heat eased. The air felt cooler. The water held. But the fires didn't stay separate. They joined and became one system, moving, pulling air into it. And then the wind shifted, not away from the flames, toward them, dragging fire across the ground, closer to the banks. The air changed. Each breath took effort. The place people had run to was shrinking. People who had waded in for relief now had to stay in, just to hold position. Those who couldn't move, didn't. More people kept coming, from every direction, because from where they stood, it still looked like the only place left. By the time Tanimoto reached the river, the trap was clear. Behind him, fire. In front of him, water that no longer saved anyone. And in between, people, hundreds of them, maybe more. He looked across the river. Hundreds more on the other side, trapped. too far to reach, too weak to cross. With the fire closing in, he could see them. They could see him. And there was nothing between them but water. And no way to reach them. Tanimoto scanned the river. A small boat, tied near the bank. Still, he moved closer and saw what was inside. Bodies, 5 of them, lying motionless. He stopped. He looked up, across the river. The people were still there, watching, waiting, with the fire closing in. He looked back at the boat, back at the bodies. Then, he stepped into the water, reached for the rope, and pulled the boat closer. One by one, he pushed the bodies out, into the water. He climbed in, untied the rope, picked up the oar, turned the boat toward the other side, and started rowing. One boat, one man, and on both banks, the fire was closing in. He pushed off, the water, murky, the air thick with smoke, the sun, a dim red smear above the city. Heat rolled off the fires in waves, striking his face as he rowed. On the far bank, people too weak to move. One by one, he lifted them into the boat, 5 at a time. Their bodies were heavy, limp. He rowed them back to the sand spit. Others dragged them out. He turned around and went back, again and again. Each trip made the river worse. The water crowded with debris, the smoke lower, the heat never letting up. Sometimes he could barely see the bank before he reached it. Sometimes he heard people before he saw them. Sometimes hands reached for the side of the boat before he had even stopped rowing. More than once, the boat nearly tipped. More than once, he had to shove bodies away from the hull just to keep from going under himself. He kept rowing anyway. Back and forth through the fire, back and forth through the water. Then he looked down. The boat was riding lower than before. And ahead of him, on the far bank, some more people, still waiting. He kept going, trip after trip, back and forth across the burning water. No count, no record, just as many as he could carry. When the fires began to die, the work didn't stop. It changed. The loudest sound now was a single word: water. It came from everywhere. He found a bucket, filled it, moved through the survivors one by one. A few sips each. No more. Some said not to give it, said it would kill them faster. He gave it anyway, because when someone looked at him and asked, there was nothing else left to give. The city went quiet, not peaceful, empty, flattened. And then, the people who had walked away without a wound started to fall. Days and weeks later, hair, strength, voice, gone. The damage hadn't ended. It had just taken longer to arrive. He felt it too, the exhaustion, the slow collapse from the inside. But he didn't stop. A journalist arrived, and what he found in that city became the most widely read account of a single event in history. The story crossed oceans. People wanted to know what had happened, what it felt like, what it cost. And years later, Tanimoto found himself standing in a room far from Hiroshima, face to face, with the man who had been aboard that US plane above Hiroshima that morning. In May of 1955, Tanimoto was invited onto an American television show. This Is Your Life. He thought it was just another appearance, another story, but this one was different. On stage, the host began to speak about Hiroshima, about the morning, about the plane. Then, Another man was brought out. He had been there that day, not on the ground, in the sky. He was the co-pilot of the plane, the man who had watched Hiroshima disappear beneath him. For a moment, neither of them moved. They stood a few feet apart, linked by a single moment. 10 years earlier, the pilot spoke first, about the mission, the clear sky, the drop. Then they stepped forward, and they shook hands. No anger, no accusation, just two men, standing on opposite sides of the same moment. One had seen the world end from above, the other had lived through it below, and somehow, they were both still there. Lewis later wrote, "My God, what have we done?" Kiyoshi Tanimoto spent 41 years answering that question, one person at a time. 56 years later, a different skyline, but the same impossible morning. A man named Rick Rescorla walked back into a burning building where 2,700 lives were at stake. You can watch that video here. Thanks for watching.